StudyIQ IAS, आपका सिलेक्शन हमारा मिशन।
Hello everyone, good afternoon to all. Am I audible online? Fair enough. Okay, now, till now, we have tried to understand the basics of evolution, including the whole idea of natural selection, how exactly Darwin tried to explain the idea of natural selection, focusing upon the notion of environment and habitat playing a very important role. At the same time, population having variations. Out of these variations, some of these variations are adaptive. We call them the adaptive traits, and some of them are maladaptive. We call them maladaptive traits. And over generations, the frequency of the adaptive traits increase in the population, while the frequency of maladaptive traits decline in the population. Right? This is what we understood. And enough time passes, it can lead to a speciation event. That is, the subsequent generations, one of the subsequent generations will be very different from what? The original founding population, because now the complete maladaptive traits have been eliminated, and the new adaptive traits which are there, they might also transform in the context of what? A particular geography, right? But Darwin did not know how these traits are inherited from one generation to another. He did not have any idea about inheritance. What he thought is that actually inheritance is of blending type. It is blending inheritance. Why was it termed as blending inheritance? Because he thought that representative gemmules of all of the body parts are present in what? The reproductive organs. In the reproductive organs. This was his idea, right? So both these will be present in what? The male and the female, which are interbreeding with each other. And as such, these gemmules are then going to get blended, and eventually the offsprings will have what? A mix of traits of both the male and the female, which are interbreeding with each other. However, later, Gregor Mendel did the experiments on garden pea, and he highlighted that inheritance is actually not of blending nature. Rather, inheritance is of what? Inheritance is carried on through something called as discrete units, which maintain individuality. Right? For example, when he crossed pure tall variety with pure short variety, what he found was, in the generation, he is going to find what? A tall and a small one. Then he found that again, this will have what? A tall and a small one. When you breed this one, you will have what? A tall and a small one, and the tall and the small one. Meaning, if the parents are homozygous, right? Both of them are homozygous. The first generation will be what? Heterozygous. First generation will have heterozygosity. Heterozygous, which is what? Which is the genotype. Genotype meaning the composition of this particular unit is what? It is of same type. It is called as what? Homozygous, while here it is heterozygous. But if you look at the phenotype, that how exactly do they look like in physical characteristics, which is what? The phenotype. Phenotypically, this will also be tall and this will be what? Short, and all of these will be tall. But the difference between this tall and this tall is what? Phenotypically, they are tall, but and also genotypically they have both the tall variants. While they have what? Phenotypically they are tall, but genotypically they are what? Heterozygous. Genotypically they are heterozygous. Heterozygous meaning they have one unit which is related to what? Short. And in this heterozygous combination, the one unit that is able to express itself in the phenotype, in the heterozygous combination, the unit which is able to express itself in the phenotype is basically called as what? It is called as the unit which is able to express itself in the phenotype in heterozygous condition. What? It will be called as a dominant allele. It will be called as what? A dominant allele. While the one which is able to express itself only in homozygous conditions, The tall one is also expressing itself in what? Homozygous condition, but it has the capability of expressing itself even in heterozygous conditions in the phenotype. And that is why it is called as what? Dominant. The recessive will only express itself in the phenotype when it is present in the combination of homozygous condition. That is why it is called as what? A recessive allele. We call it the recessive allele, right? So this combination was later the discoveries highlighted that this combination is actually called as what? A gene which has two subunits, and these two subunits were termed as what? The alleles. Alleles can be of two types. One is dominant, another one is recessive. And we know which one is dominant, which one is recessive. Dominant is the one which is able to express itself in the phenotype in a heterozygous condition also. While the recessive one is the one which is able to express itself in the phenotype in which condition? In homozygous condition only, right? So the recessive trait will express itself in the phenotype only when it is present in homozygous conditions, or the genotype is homozygous, right? When he further interbred the subsequent into the next generation, so if the parents were like this, what would be the next generation here, right? And then what? TT. Here they will have what? TT. And here we will have what? TT. If you look at phenotypically, in this the phenotype will be what? Phenotype will be 3:1. That is 3 tall and 1 will be what? Short. 3 will be tall and 1 will be short. That is the idea. But if you look at genotypically, genotype will be of 3 types. 1:2:1. 1 will be what? Pure tall. Pure tall, or you can say its genotype will be what? Homozygous for tall. While 2 will be what? Heterozygous. These two are heterozygous tall. Meaning genotype is heterozygous, phenotype is tall. And here what? Homozygous short. This is how the inheritance happens. Later researchers actually highlighted that human cell is composed of something called as a nucleus. In nucleus there are 23 pairs found of something called as chromosomes. So what Mendel interpreted in this form actually is what? Is an information that is present on these chromosomes. The good thing about these chromosomes is that out of these 23 pairs, there is a fixed location on all the pairs. Right? You will have pair number 1, pair number 2, pair number 3, pair number 4 till pair number 23. And in all these locations, at location number 1, in this pair, one of it would be provided by what? Male, another one will be provided by whom? Female. Right? And it stands true for almost all the location. Here, one is provided by father, one is provided by mother. One is provided by father, another by mother. One by father, another by mother, so on and so forth. So the 23rd pair comes out to be what? If it is X and X, if one is X, another one is X, it is what? A female. If it is X and Y, it is what? A male. And inevitably, the Y chromosome is provided by whom? The male only. Y chromosome is provided by only the male members, right? And that is why its sex is male, right? So this is a very simplistic thing that we can understand here, XX and XY. Then we looked at the idea that out of all of these 23, these are called as what? Which chromosomes? Sex chromosomes. While the first 22 pairs are called as from 1 to 22, all these pairs are called as the autosomes. In body, the cells are called as what? Somatic cells and sex cells. Chromosome alag hai. In body, if you look at the cells, cells are called as what? The other cells of the body, they are called as what? Somatic cells. While the ones which are present in our reproductive organs, they are what? They are producing sperms and eggs. They are what? They are the sex cells which are there, right? How do the cells duplicate? One process is mitosis, another one is meiosis, right? What does mitosis produce? Identical daughter cells. Identical daughter cells, right? Meiosis produces identical daughter cells, meaning the genetic material remains the same. If you look at meiosis, what does it do? It produces four haploid, and actually all of the variations are brought about by this process of meiosis. Meiosis has a very important role to play in bringing about variations. First one is what? Random assortment. How it is brought about? One is the random assortment. Second one is what? Recombination, right? Which is the result of the crossing over, right? Which 23 will be present in one of the haploid daughter cells is a random event, right? And even the random ones which have reached in this one sex cell, the 23 ones which are present in the random sex cells, you find what? They're actually not the same as the one which were actually originally present in one of the member who is donating these sex cells, right? Why? Because already the genetic material has been exchanged between the two chromosomes which are homologous pairs, right? So we have what? If these are the two, they are called as what? On one location, on the same location which are present, we call them as what? Homologous pair. We call it the homologous pair. Okay? This is what is called as what? The homologous pair, right? And these homologous pairs can actually exchange some genetic component. For example, this part will be removed from here and it will attach here, and this part will attach here. So when they have exchanged this item, it is called as what? Crossing over, right? And then in the meiosis process, these will get separated from each other, they will copy each other, and eventually what? The next 23 that you are getting in the daughter cells, they will be a random event, right? And even the single strand will be different. So every time a couple gives birth to a child, the chromosomes which are provided by the sex cells, they are fairly random. And this is why not all the children of the same parents are the same. All the siblings are different. What is one scenario in which the siblings can be exact same genotypically? Will all the twins be the same? No. Will all the twins be the same? No. Right? So there is what? If they are monozygous, right? Meaning what? If let's say an original cell was formed by the fusion of the sex cells, and then it got divided into two. What do you say? Two embryos from the same cell. Eventually, both of them will have what? Same genetic material, because this has happened through the process of meiosis. Right? While if two different cells have fused and then they are growing as this, they will be called as what? Non-identical twins, or they were called as what? Dizygotic, because the zygotes were different. The zygotes were very different. Yes, everyone getting this point? Right? Only in identical twins, mean monozygotic twins will only be having the same genetic material, right? Otherwise, there will always be a difference. We can use different terms for them, but this is how it works. Got the point? Yes or no? Okay. Meiosis plays a very important role in bringing about variations through crossing over, recombination, and random assortment being present in one of the haploid daughter cells after the process of meiosis. Fine. I hope it is clear to everyone. Then, when we have looked at all these ideas, I told you that when we found that in a cell there is a nucleus and there are these chromosomes, later it was found that these chromosomes are composed of a chemical. which is called as DNA. Deoxyribonucleic acid. Deoxyribonucleic acid, which has sugars, phosphate, and nitrogen bases. Nitrogen bases. It has a double helical structure. It has a double helical structure, meaning there are two vertical strands and there are horizontal strands which connect these two. The horizontal strand is basically what? A combination of these nitrogen bases, while the vertical ones are what? The sugars and the phosphates, right? Bases are of four types: AT, GC, right? So adenine always combines with thymine, guanine always combines with the cytosine, right? This is the basic fundamental rule that we see here. Fine. So if you are going to unroll a chromosome, what you are going to actually get is these bases. है नहीं? अगर आप क्रोमोसोम को अगर ऐसे खोल के देखोगे, स्प्रिंग मान लो कि क्रोमोसोम एक स्प्रिंग की तरह, when you are going to stretch it, you are going to find what? This. Just a simple analogy to explain you think. Fine. So what we are getting here is that there is this chemical which is present in this thing, right? Now another thing that we get to know when looking at the chromosomes is that when these chromosomes are present in homologous pairs, actually all of these pairs are what? Composed of DNA only. And this code is getting repeated again and again. Sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, AT, GC, or any random number is present there, which is present. And what we have learned from Mendel's idea, that gene is the one which decides the physical traits. Gene decides physical traits, which is composed of two subunits, which are called as alleles, right? So if you see the physical traits, they are decided by what? Genes, which are further composed of two subunits, which are called as the alleles. This is a very simplistic idea that we all have understood till now. So there are physical traits. For example, for every physical trait, there is a gene, which is composed of two subunits. And these alleles can be what? Dominant and recessive. And they are inherited in the next generation in the form of what? Discrete units. They always maintain their individuality. They are never lost. They are never lost, or they never fuse with the other one. They maintain their individuality and they are transmitted from one generation to the another one. That is why you see what? Some of the traits not manifesting themselves in the physical traits. Why? Because the recessive might be hidden because of the dominant one which is present. But if it is able to create a homozygous condition in the next generation, the recessive one will manifest itself in what? The physical trait. The recessive one is going to manifest itself in the physical trait. That's a very clear-cut idea that we have now. So for every physical trait that we have in our body, broadly the understanding that exists is that there is a gene somewhere in our nucleus. For every physical trait that we see, we have what? A gene that is present in our nucleus. And where will the gene be present? The gene will be present on what? Chromosomes. Gene is going to be present on chromosome. There is a specific location of a gene on a chromosome that decides a physical trait. That is the most simplistic understanding that we can have till now, right? So what we found is, in the cell there is a chromosome. There are 23 pairs of chromosome. Each chromosome location is fixed. First pair, second pair, third pair, fourth pair, 23rd pair. And it is inevitable that all these locations are always fixed. 23rd pair is the one which is going to decide your sex. It can never be the first chromosome, or it can never be the second chromosomal pair. Meaning every chromosome has fixed location and every chromosome has fixed kind of characteristics which are going to deal. है नहीं बात है, right? And where is the gene located? The genes are located on these homologous pairs. Just for example, let's assume that on third pair at a particular location, there is a gene which is going to decide what kind of color your eye will have. So if we found out this by experiments, eventually we have to assume what? That in every individual, in every human being, on this third pair, on that fixed location, the gene for the eye color will be present. Simple as that. For example, what decides your sex? It is inevitably always in all the human beings. It is the 23rd pair. Will you be a male? Will you be a female? Will you be an intersex individual? Is decided by what? The 23rd pair. What exactly is the combination present on the 23rd pair that decides that who you are? sex-wise. Are you a male? Are you a female? Are you an intersex individual? Right? For the sake of simplicity, let's assume there are only males and females. Intersex, though, we are going to learn it later. Okay? This is something that becomes clearer now when we look at this idea. So what we understood is that for every physical trait, the location of the gene is fixed on a particular pair of chromosomes. Is it clear to everyone? For every physical trait, the location of the gene is fixed on a particular chromosomal pair. Let's say, for example, for your hair type, if it is the chromosome number 6 that is deciding. So chromosome number means chromosomal pair number 6 is deciding. So on that chromosomal pair number 6, on a particular location, so what is important is the gene's location. We call it the loci. What is important is the location of that gene. That is very, very important. It is same across the species. Variation can come up in only that particular location. It would not happen as if the sex chromosome's location changes and it is present at 11th number. No, it is not going to happen. It is always going to be that way only. Right? A very simplistic understanding. So what we are trying to understand is what is the code that runs behind us. And that is leading to what? The manifestation of these physical traits. And that is the gene which has a fixed location on a fixed chromosomal pair. Right? Where is this gene located? Always, inevitably, it is located at the same location on both the chromosomes which are part of a pair. So the alleles that we were discussing, the dominant and the recessive one, they are located what? They are located actually at a fixed location on a chromosomal pair. For example, now if you want to understand what Mendel was explaining, if Mendel was explaining to us about the height of the pea plant, he was highlighting about the combinations called as TT, capital T, or capital T, small t, or small t, small t. Where would it be located? It would be located on a fixed chromosomal pair number at a particular location. Let's say this is the location. And this will lead to what? For example, this is the one on one of the chromosomes, one of the alleles will be present, and on another chromosome, another allele will be present. Right? Which will manifest in the physical trait in the form of what? P and T, which is the genotype which is present on the chromosome. So phenotypically it will be what? It will be tall. But genotypically it is what? Heterozygous. Genotypically it is heterozygous. This is clear, I think, till now. Is it clear, everyone? Yes? This makes sense. Now we understand the mechanism behind this, how exactly it is happening. Okay? And what exactly will this allele be like? I told you chromosome is composed of what? The DNA. Chromosome is composed of DNA actually. Chromosome is actually composed of what? The DNA. If chromosome is composed of the DNA, what exactly happens? It will have what? A combination of sugars and phosphates, which is always the true. But in the ladder, in the side rungs, in the vertical rungs of the chromosome of the DNA, you have what? You have a fixed kind of thing. Sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate. Changes happen in what? The nitrogen bases. So a fixed code will be there. So we are not concerned with the sugar and the bases, sugar and the phosphate. We are concerned with what? Nitrogen bases. So a code of nitrogen bases is going to decide what? Let's say this is a combination that is present. So this would be termed as what? Gene. And a change in this would be leading to what? A new allele. A change in this coding will be leading to what? Allele. When we are saying that this gene actually manifests itself in the physical trait, what are we saying? Genes manifest themselves in the physical trait. This is an idea that we have been talking about. How does it manifest? Actually, genes have a code. Genes actually have a code which is going to produce, by the way of what? Protein synthesis, certain kind of amino acids, because eventually all of your physical traits are what? Proteins only. It is basically what? Proteins only. So protein synthesis, why it is important for us? Because it is the protein synthesis through which the activated gene is actually going to produce what? Amino acids of a particular type, which is going to manifest in your physical traits. Clear? The manifestation of physical traits is a result of what? The protein that is being produced, the amino acids that are being produced, because amino acids in chain, they actually produce what? The proteins. Yes, everyone? That is why I told you protein synthesis is only important for us from that perspective. If God forbid UPSC asks a question, it is going to be a clear-cut step-by-step process that you need to write. Are you getting my point? It is more of a biological thing, but we have to study it from what? Evolutionary perspective. So what is the role of the gene? Gene is basically what? A combination of the alleles. Alleles are what? A combination of the nitrogen bases of the DNA. So they are going to produce a particular amino acid, which is going to manifest in the form of protein. Protein is basically what? The composition of all your physical traits. Yes or no? Simplistic. This is what is simple, I think. Right? Now you see, so what does the gene do? The genes basically are doing what? The genes are basically going to produce proteins by the way of amino acids, and this protein is nothing but the manifestation of that gene into the physical trait. This is the actual channel through which the physical traits manifest. Mendel did it the other way around. Mendel first observed the physical characteristics, and then he found out that maybe there might be this such kind of combination, which was termed later as genotype. But now we have a better understanding that there are genes which are present on what? The chromosomal pairs, which produce amino acids, which produce proteins. Proteins are the ones which are manifested in the form of the physical traits. Clear, everyone? I guess this is making sense. Now see, if you look at a chromosomal pair, if you look at one of the chromosomes in this homologous pair, we've already seen what? Genes are located at particular locations. So it is not that this chromosome will only have gene for one particular trait. It will have multiple genes present for multiple traits which are there. And every chromosomal pair has such kind of information. Because there are thousands of features in the body. In the human body, in any other animal also, it is the same thing. When there are thousands of such physical traits, there might be thousands of genes which are present in the chromosomes. Now, let's say if this is a pair on which this is one set of gene, there will be another set of gene, another set of gene, another set of gene. We are assuming ki 4 ye maan lete hain. We are assuming that there are only 4 types. Now what happens? In this chromosome, not all parts are genes. These DNA combinations of the nitrogen bases, actually, some parts are the ones which code for proteins. Other parts of the chromosome are actually what? Non-coding. Coding because they are the ones which are going to lead to what? Protein production. Some are just randomly present there, which have no role to play whatsoever in the manifestation of the physical traits. As of now, let's assume that. Hey, baat ki nahi hai? Are you getting my point? They don't have much role to play in producing the physical traits. Yes, no? Online? I hope you are understanding this thing. Some part of the DNA is only the one which is activated to produce the proteins, which is called as what? Coding. While most part is non-coding. Non-coding meaning it is not going to manifest in the physical trait. It has nothing to do with the physical traits. It is just present there. Okay, that is called as what? Non-coding. And what exactly does the coding part do? Coding part is the one which produces the amino acids, which is later going to convert into proteins, and proteins are the ones which manifest in the physical traits. Simple? Yes or no? And this code is going to be what? A fixed code. This code is going to be fixed. And what is going to be this code? A combination of the nitrogen bases, because DNA to hai eventually. Eventually it is DNA only. Coding part is actually DNA, and DNA mein sugar phosphate to common hai, to uska hame ko lena dena nahi hai. It is only the nitrogen bases which can vary in the horizontal ladder of the DNA, in the double helical structure. Now what happens if, let's say, by chance in this code one nitrogen base has been replaced due to the process called as what? When the cell is getting duplicated in the process of meiosis, let's say one base of the code has changed. It will be leading to what? A new allele. And this allele will manifest differently in the physiphenotype, because now the protein that is being produced will be a different protein. Coding part mein change ho gaya, ek bhi code ka, ek bhi letter ka, so the whole set of meaning changes. When the meaning changes, it is going to produce what? A new kind of amino acid. It is going to produce a new kind of protein, and it is going to produce a new kind of variation in the physical traits. Agree? What if this change happens in the non-coding part? Nothing changes. Does not manifest in the physical traits. If no change, if let's say a change happens, if there is a copying error during the duplication process, In the non-coding part of the DNA, it will have no manifestation in the physical traits. It will have no consequence on the physical traits. The consequence on the physical traits is only possible when the change in the base pairs happens in the coding part of the DNA. Right? This change happens by a process we call as mutation. What do we call it? Mutation. And which mutation is important? The mutation that happens in the coding part of the DNA. The mutation that happens in the coding part of the DNA is actually very, very relevant for bringing about what? Variations in the physical traits. And actually, what Darwin was saying, Darwin said that in natural selection, in an environment, there's a population which has variations. What produces variations? Genetic recombination, crossover, mutation. Are you getting my point? It is actually the mutation which brings about what? Variations. Why? Because a mutation is going to produce what? A new allele because of new combination of the nitrogen bases. Simple. Don't complicate it. Just keep it as simple as that. So mutation is said to be what? A very important source of new genetic material. In recombination, new genetic material is not being produced. Just a new combination is being produced. Here, all of a sudden, a new genetic material is being produced by the mutation. A new kind of allele is going to be present. Till now, we have been assuming that for a particular physical trait, there are only two types of alleles, but in reality, there can be multiple alleles. But out of those multiple alleles that are possible, only two are present on the chromosome. क्योंकि दो ही present हो सकते हैं. नहीं समझे? There can be what? Multiple alleles, but only two will be present in combination on the chromosome. है मान लेते हैं कि अपन ने टॉल और टॉल ही अज्यूम किया अभी तक टी वाला. इसमें अपन मान लेते हैं कि पूरा टी टी और आर एस टी यू वी डब्ल्यू इतने सारे वेरिएंट्स हैं हाइट को लेके. इनमें से कोई भी दो आ जाएंगे यहाँ पे. Any two out of these alleles will be present. And what will these alleles be like? These alleles are basically what? The changes in the coding part that has happened. This has produced a new variation. है मान लेते स्किन कलर का है तो एक हो गया व्हाइट, एक हो गया ब्लैक, एक हो गया ब्राउन, एक लाइटर शेड ऑफ ब्राउन, सबके लिए एलील हो गए मान लेते हैं. जस्ट सिंपल. Are you getting this point? ठीक है. तो why mutation is so important? Because mutation produces new genetic material which is going to manifest in the physical traits in the variation. Right? So protein synthesis is only important for us from this perspective. Not necessarily the technical part of it is very important. Protein synthesis is important for us to understand how the coding DNA and the changes in it produces mutations and produces what? A new type of physical trait which is responsible for what? The variation that Darwin was talking about. Where did the variations come from? From mutation. है नहीं? That is why in the population you find what? Multiple kinds of physical variation for the same trait. दो ही थोड़ी होते हैं कि एक टॉल एक शॉर्ट है, बीच में कुछ है ही नहीं. Are you getting my point? Even in a population, the same trait will vary multiply. Do all of us have only two types of eye colors? No. So how does it happen? Problem is we try to interpret it only from Mendel's perspective. We think that there are only two alleles which are present, but there can be multiple alleles which are present. Okay, but anyways, let's not get into that. But my point was what? Mutation is the source of new genetic material. Recombination only produces what? That what kind of genetic material is being transmitted from the father and the mother to the offsprings. Yes, everyone, people online, all of the people who have joined recently. Is it making sense? Regular customers, no. New customers. क्यों मर जाएगा? तो उसे मर क्यों जाएगा? अभी पढ़ेंगे उसको, वो अलग चीज है, वो अलग चीज है, बताऊंगा. New students, sorry, I chose the wrong term. Customers, new students. वो education has become a business वाली बात भी तो है. So when it is business, it is a service provider and another one is customer. When it is education, it is a teacher and a student. Choice is yours. Fine. I hope this makes things clearer to you, right? So what I told you is that even for a particular trait, we'll have what multiple alleles that are possible. Multiple alleles that are possible, and they are the ones which are going to produce what? So many variations. How do these variations come up? How do these different alleles are produced? Through mutation. That is the only way we can produce it. Some mutations are going to only bring about variations. Some of them can actually be very detrimental. An individual might not even survive. Mutations can come up because of copying errors. It can come up because of what? Radioactive substances. Like what happened in case of Japan in the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Right? Radioactivity can bring about what? Mutations. It is one of the sources of mutation. Otherwise, it is like a copying error. For example, you have given this task to someone that copy this genetic code in the next cell. In the biological organisms, it happens through what? The cell duplication process, in which the replication is happening. But let's say you have given the task to someone. He has to copy exactly the same code into the next cell which is there. But while doing this, he has missed one code. Mutation, new allele, new variation. That is why it is called as what? Copying error. Right? So if you understand this basic idea that what exactly natural selection is, how exactly does it operate at a very simplistic level? Environment, population, variation. Some variations are beneficial. Why? Because they are going to help the individuals in surviving, getting food, surviving till reproductive age and producing viable offsprings. And secondly, what? These variations will be termed as adaptive ones. The other ones are maladaptive ones. Frequency of the adaptive ones are going to increase. How variations are brought about? Through the whole process of genetics that we have studied. Right? And it is mutation which is the source of variations. First source was recombination, because it is going to just rearrange the already available genetic material and bring about a variation. Are you getting my point? आ रहा है समझ में? नहीं आ रहा, मैं बताता हूं. मान लेते हैं, let us assume that in this male and in this female, only a fixed amount of genetic material is present. मान लेते हैं 2 kg genetic material है, सिंपल समझो. और 2 kg में जितना भी कॉम्बिनेशन है वो हो सकता है इवेंचुअली रहेगा 2 kg है. और बिकॉज ऑफ म्यूटेशन समथिंग न्यू विल बी एडेड. 100 ग्राम और ऐड कर देगा वो, नया टाइप का वेरिएशन. इट कैन डिलीशन कैन ऑल्सो अकर. ठीक है? अ न्यू थिंग हैज बीन एडेड. इट इज इन एडिशन टू द ऑलरेडी एग्जिस्टिंग जेनेटिक मटीरियल. Just at a very simplistic level, right? So it is what mutation brings about the changes. So when we were discussing the mechanism through which variations are brought about, because Darwin talked about this idea of elaborately that how evolution happens through the process of natural selection, and we understood natural selection, how does it operate. We saw the example of the peppered moth in case of the Industrial Revolution in England, that exemplified how exactly the evolution process is happening. But Darwin could not tell us how exactly variants are brought about, how variations come up. But later discoveries, later scientific analysis provided us insights into the idea that how variations are brought about, right? So we looked at this in the previous discussion, that variations are brought about why? By crossover and recombination and a random assortment. right? Due to random segregation in the process of meiosis. Are you getting my point? In the process of meiosis, this is this random variation that comes about. When we talk about mutation, now let us look at what mutation is all about. Mutation is nothing but what? A change in the DNA sequence. And change in DNA sequence simply means what? Change in the base pairs. Sugar phosphate तो same ही है. Is it visible clearly online? Right? And how does it happen? We saw the whole mechanism behind it. Meiosis, duplication. During that process, an error can come up. Such changes produce what? An altered gene. Why? Because it will be going to produce what? An altered allele. New allele is there, a new combination of alleles will produce what? A new type of gene. New combination of allele is going to produce what? A new kind of gene. During the cell reproduction, DNA almost always replicates itself exactly. This is a normal circumstance. In normal circumstances, it is always the same process. It does not change the genetic material. However, sometimes the replication process produces an error. It is an error, it is an error. Just keep this thing in mind. Or a collection of errors in the DNA code. The majority of mutations are thought to occur because of occasional mismatching of the chemical bases that make up the DNA. Occasional mismatching of the chemical bases that make up the DNA. Similar to the way in which a typist can actually make an error. You gave him a written document and you told him, please type it down in the Word document. So while typing, he has missed some letters, some words he has skipped, and that's an error. The copy that he has produced by typing is not the exact copy of what you have given him in the written text. This is an error. An error produces what? New information. The exact information has been lost. New information has been created. Now some changes happen. है कि नहीं? जैसे 3 Idiots में हुआ था. चमत्कार में सी की जगह उसने बी कर दिया था, है ना? उसने टर्म चेंज कर दिया और पूरा मीनिंग ही चेंज हो गया, है ना? Copying error है. Copying error produced a whole lot of new meaning altogether. So exactly the same thing is happening here, right? Just as a typist will make errors in copying the manuscript, so will DNA in duplicating itself occasionally. Not every time it does it. Sometimes it does it, right? A mutation will result from such an error. Mutation is said to occur from such an error which is there. The mutation can be any inheritable change in the structure or amount of genetic material. It can be any heritable change in the structure of amount of genetic material, because so much of any person's DNA is non-coding. Non-coding means what? It does not manifest in the physical trait. It does not produce amino acids and proteins which manifest in the physical trait. It is of no importance. Are you getting my point? Right? So an error in the non-coding part of the DNA does not produce any consequences in the physical traits terms. And why we are over-focused on physical traits? Because for natural selection, it is the physical trait which is important. Eventually, it is the physical trait that is important, because that physical trait is going to be eventually selected by the environment. If it is helpful, if it is advantageous, if it is adaptive. So DNA is like what? If you are using a phone and the applications inside it, you'll see what? What is the code that is running behind that application? That is more important. Yes, no? People online? Right? A new sequence of coding. So we have seen what? Because so much of any person's DNA is non-coding, many mutations do not affect the individual's health and well-being or survival. It does not have much impact. It does not have much impact on the individual's health or well-being. A new sequence of coding DNA that results from mutation. Coding DNA में change is a very important change. It might have a profound consequences. These consequences can be what? Both positive and both negative. Right? For example, the sickle cell anemia is caused by what? A new allele of hemoglobin. Sickle cell anemia is caused by what? A new allele of hemoglobin, right? Now, if it is present in homozygous condition, the individual does not survive, right? But in heterozygous conditions, in certain areas, it is actually an adaptive trait. Both positive and negative consequences are there attached to the same variation that happens. समझे? ठीक है? For example, the mutation code the DNA for a protein. तो हमारा logic ही क्या है? The coding DNA is the one which is responsible for what? Producing amino acids which lead to what? Protein. So the mutation might code the DNA for a protein with an altered or different function than that performed by the protein coded for in the original parent strand of the DNA. Originally तो ये purpose था. चाय का time हो गया. Or the mutation might create a sequence that results in either no protein or abnormal DNA. आ रहा है समझ में? I hope this is clear to everyone. ठीक है? See, we don't need to get into the technicalities here. We need to just understand the broad thing that is happening. Simple as that. Because our subject is anthropology. Our subject is not biology or any other technical subject. तो टेक्निकल सब्जेक्ट में अपन को जाकर उसमें देखना होगा कि क्या हुआ क्या नहीं हुआ, वो उस पर बहुत डिटेल क्वेश्चन आएगा. यहाँ पे उतना क्वेश्चन नहीं है. Here we are going to see a question which is broadly going to align with what? Our understanding of broad evolution, and we need to know these mechanisms very simply. Right? That is why when people go and read these more technical books like PNAF, it creates a lot of confusion also. It does not set things into the context. That is what I have observed. Because the broader understanding, the understanding of genetics in the broad context of the evolution is missing. And that is where the problem arises, because you then try to mug it up and then eventually it becomes difficult to express in the examination, right? So what we see here is, how do the mutations occur? They occur at random and they can occur in any cell, but the ones with the consequences for future generation takes place in what? Gametes. They can happen in your somatic cells also, but they don't have any consequences. But if they happen in your gametes, which are produced by your reproductive organs, then it will have consequences, because the next generation is going to produce with that allelic combination only. ठीक है? Gametes may transfer mutations to the offsprings depending upon what happens during the meiosis in the parents, regardless of their causes or outcomes. Mutations are the only source of new genetic material. Why? Because in crossing over or in recombination, the already existing genetic material is being just rearranged. New information is not being added. Getting my point? It is just getting rearranged. New content is not being added. Point? Yes, no? Then there are different types of mutations. First one is point mutation. Okay? Not much important for us, but at least let's know it. Mutations involving incorrect base pairs are called as what? Point mutations. So, मान लो AT की जगह CG आ गया, तो any such kind of combination can produce. A synonymous point mutation creates an altered triplet in the DNA, but the alteration carries with it the original amino acid. Because the amino acid is the same, the protein formed is the same. A non-synonymous point mutation results in a matchup that brings along a different amino acid. Such a mutation can have what? Dramatic results for the individual carrying it. For example, we have certain case studies here. These are examples that we need to write in the examination. A mutation on human chromosome 11. I told you the chromosomal pairs number is very important. On that, there is a fixed location. Right? I showed you the diagram of those two leaves kind structure, homologous pair. So on the 11th homologous pair, it converts a GAG codon into a GTG codon. Then the GAG codon is encoded to produce what? Amino acid valine, whereas the GTG is encoded to produce what? Glutamic acid. This substitution leads to abnormal hemoglobin that results in what? Sickle cell anemia. Similarly, galactosemia is caused by a recessive mutant gene and usually results in mental retardation and blindness, because it can be prevented by dietary restrictions begun at the early age. In this instance, what happens? the intervention of human life, etc., the some cultural factors can modify. Genetic changes are actually not the final word on what is going to be manifested. Genes actually provide the broad limitation, and then cultural interventions can also bring about some sort of changes. Okay? Cultural interventions, for example, let's say somebody is born with certain heart-related disease, which is a genetic disease in nature. It is because of chromosomal error. So we have the way of what? Treating the heart diseases now through medicine. Medicine is what? Culture. Medicine is basically what? A human creation. They've observed things and they've created this thing which treats certain conditions. Through that, the lifetime of that individual could be increased. Yes or no? Then there is called as frame shift mutation. A result of the shifting of the base pairs caused by base insertion, a new base is inserted. The reading frame of a gene is altered or stopped entirely. It produces a protein having no function. Extra protein is there. Such a mutation usually involves a small part of the DNA sequence, often just a base pair or relatively limited number of bases. Other kinds of mutations can affect far more of the genome. Transposable elements are the genes that can copy themselves to entirely different places along the DNA sequence. यहाँ से कहीं और चले जाएंगे. If such a gene inserts itself into another gene, it can fundamentally alter the other gene. If as is strongly likely, the gene transposes itself to a non-coding area of the DNA sequence. Little or no significant alteration will occur. Anyways, what is important for us is the impact of it. Impact is all mutations fall into either of the two types. Spontaneous mutations having no causes. Induced mutations are caused by specific environmental agents, usually associated with human activity. These agents are called as what? Mutagens. These are the ones which alter the coding part of the DNA and then it manifests into the physical traits. And now we are knowing that what are these? These are ionic radiations, X-rays, and various toxic chemicals have been linked to mutations in animals and humans. Fair enough? Most mutations are spontaneous and are simply DNA copying errors. The human mutation rate is higher in male sex cells than in female sex cells, but is generally on the order of 1 per million per nucleotide per generation. Very limited. For individuals, most mutations are relatively harmless, while few may have what? Profound consequences. ठीक बात है? In most of the instances, the infertility is the result of what? Male infertility. Because sperm is far more sensitive to these changes. But how society works? Society accuses females of infertility. This is how the society works. If a couple is not able to give birth to a child, it is inevitably the society is going to blame on what? The females only. Right? And even giving birth to a baby is a thing that is decided by what? The male 23rd chromosome. है नहीं है, बट इसका मतलब ये नहीं मेल को भी पता नहीं था, अब पता लगा. अब पता लगने के बाद भी अगर मेल ऐसा कर रहा है तो प्रॉब्लम है. वीडियो दिखाओ उनको ये हो रहा है. देखो उसका एक तरीका है. उनके जान पहचान वाले का अंकल, उनको बोलो, फिर अंकल व्हाट्सएप फॉरवर्ड करेंगे, उस पर विश्वास कर लो. उस तरह से यूज करो जैसे उनको कन्विंस कर सकते हैं. तुम कन्विंस करने जाओगे, मानेंगे नहीं तुम्हारी बात कि बड़ों से ऐसे बात करते. गेम ओवर. है कि नहीं? एक रैंडम नया नंबर खरीदो और बोलो नमस्कार मिश्रा जी और एक फॉरवर्ड कर दो, तो लगेगा काम की इंफॉर्मेशन. देखो culture tells us what? Culture tells us that how people are going to understand things, because their understanding is based on what? The cultural beliefs. The understanding is what? Anyone's understanding or knowledge base is basically what? Cultural in nature. In whichever culture they are born, that is going to have a heavy influence on what they think and how they behave. Right or wrong? For example, let's say you want to treat a person who is living as a tribe in some forest area. He has this belief. A tribe will have a belief that the disease is actually not being caused by the pathogens or the viruses or the bacteria. He has a belief that it is being caused by some evil spirit that has entered into the body. अब तुम जाके कह रहे हो कि नहीं यार आप तो एंटीबायोटिक खा लो, झाड़ फूंक मत करवाओ, तो मानेगा बात? नहीं मानेगा. आप बोलो झाड़ फूंक भी करवा लो, ये भी खा लो साथ में. If you will show that this thing is harmless, अरे कुछ नहीं और बस ये खा लो 2 दिन, बस कुछ नहीं, तुम अपना बाकी काम करते रहो, and that works. One of the problem with the modern period is every one of us have started thinking what? That we are intelligent and all other are fools. And my job is to actually transform everyone. It is not our job. Our job is to acquire new knowledge, but only for our use, not to give it to anyone. है कि नहीं? For example, my job is to teach. I'll teach as much as possible. It is for you to absorb. Only I can tell you as much as it is possible. I can't tell you everything. तो गोली को क्रेडिट दिलवाना भी क्यों शीतल? एंटीबायोटिक को इनाम मिलना है. हमें तो प्रॉब्लम ये है ना कि मेरा रिव्यू ठीक नहीं आएगा. So I tell you, teachers are going at length to just appease students, to show that how good I am. शुरू से ही मैंने ये वाला पर्दा डाल दिया है, खतरनाक दाढ़ी मूंछ के साथ और नाम के साथ. मेरा काम ही नहीं है तुमको खुश करना, मेरा काम है तुमको परेशान करना ताकि तुम पढ़ाई करो. इस चक्कर मुझे लग रहा है ऑफलाइन वाले बच्चों ने तो आना ही बंद कर दिया है कि फालतू पकड़ पकड़ के पूछेगा जबरदस्ती. ऑनलाइन वाले तो क्या पर्दे के पीछे छुपे रहते हैं, 2-3 लोग बोलते रहते हैं. हाँ, चैलेंज में भी नहीं आएंगे, इनको बता रहे छोड़ो यार, ये वहां जाए है पॉइंट की नहीं है. ऑनलाइन वालों को क्या डर लगता है? वो बोला डर है तो क्या स्क्रीन से थोड़ी बाहर आ जाएगा. क्यों? देखो ऑनलाइन में डर खत्म हो जाता है. ऑनलाइन में आप जाके और डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प को भी गाली दे सकते हो, कोई दिक्कत नहीं कि डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प कौन सा मेरे को पकड़ने आ जाएगा, है कि नहीं? और सामने एक इंसान मिल जाए, उसके सामने कुछ भी बोलने में आपको 4 बार सोचना पड़ेगा कि ये रिएक्ट कैसे करेगा. तभी तो इतनी ट्रोलिंग होती है इंटरनेट पर. पॉसिबल ही क्यों है? हाँ, मैं जैसे इनमें से कितने कम लोगों को जानता हूं, और पूरा कोर्स खत्म हो जाएगा मुझे पता ही नहीं चलेगा कितने लोग थे यहाँ पे. ये सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है पॉइंट की नहीं है? इंटरनेट इज एनोनिमस एंड दैट्स द ब्यूटी ऑफ इंटरनेट एंड दैट्स आल्सो द डाउन साइड ऑफ इंटरनेट. बिहार में छपरा में बैठ के आप कह सकते हो आई स्टैंड विद इजराइल, आई स्टैंड विद पैलेस्टाइन. आपसे पूछा किसी ने अंकल? ये इंटरनेट की ब्यूटी है. जैसे फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम व्हेन आई मेड अ यूट्यूब वीडियो बैक इन 2018, आई वाज आल्सो स्केप्टिकल कि कैसे बोलेंगे, क्या करेंगे. इट वाज एजुकेशन वीडियो, इट वाज द हिंदूज एनालिसिस. डरते डरते पढ़ाया, थोड़ा कुछ करा, मुझे लगा ठीक ठाक बना लिया यार. तो फिर नीचे कमेंट आया, कौन है ये आदमी? मन तो करा कि इसको दूं रिप्लाई, लेकिन फिर अपने आप को संभाला कि इस काम की सैलरी भी मिलती है, ज्यादा भावुक नहीं होना है कि नहीं बात? उसके पास इंटरनेट कनेक्शन था, उसका मन करा उसने लिख दी 4 बार, ठीक है भाई लिख लेगा. जैसे whenever I used to make those videos, जब ये हिंदू वाले, तो उस पर हमेशा यही कमेंट आता, सर वाई सो सीरियस। मैंने बोला अभी यहाँ पे मैं एक्टिंग कर रहा हूँ सीरियस वाली, और उसमें वी यूज्ड टू कम ऑन स्क्रीन ओनली फॉर अ 15 सेकंड विंडो। हेलो एंड वेलकम टू डेली न्यूज सिंप्लीफाइड, द आर्टिकल्स दैट वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस टुडे आर डिस्प्लेड ऑन योर स्क्रीन। बस इसके बाद में इट वाज ओनली दी कैनवस एंड दी पेन एंड थिंग दैट वी वर शोइंग देयर। कई सारे ऐसे ही कमेंट होते थे, व्हाई सो सीरियस। अरे सीरियस, मुझे लगता है आओ मिलो फिर बताता हूं। ठीक है, एनीवेज लेट्स कम बैक टू दिस थिंग। फर्स्ट वाज recombination, second was crossover, third is mutation. Mutation is the source of what? New genetic material. Right? For populations, mutations are inconsequential unless they offer what? Selective adaptation advantages. A mutation can have such an advantage whether or not a biological characteristic related to it enhances survival or reproduction. Our focus is on what? For individual, it can be a problematic thing. But for a population, the person who is born with a maladaptive physical trait because of the mutation will eventually die and will not pass it on to the offsprings. No problem. But if this new allele is providing any new kind of advantage in a new kind of environment, it will become adaptive. It will perpetuate. It will perpetuate or not? Yes or no? Online? Are you all getting this point? If some random mutation has happened, that individual is going to die. That individual is going to die. Because it is not going to be able to get either food, survive till reproductive age, produce viable offsprings. While a mutation that has produced a new allele, it will produce what? New kind of physical traits because of new kind of protein synthesis. And if that allele is providing it some favorable change, it is helping that individual in surviving, getting food and producing viable offsprings, it is going to be inherited. It is going to be passed on to the next generation. है कि नहीं है? So natural selection does not just talk about what? Selecting the advantageous traits. It also deselects the disadvantageous traits. Right? And in this case, it is the environment is not just the plants and the trees and the air that we see here. There are so many agents of natural selection. Are there not? Viruses, bacteria, all diseases are actually agents of natural selection. Because a person who is able to fight a viral pathogen will survive. Who is not able to fight will die, does not have any immunity. Right? So those individuals who did not have any immunity will be eliminated. For example, COVID happened. Many people died. Many of our near and dear ones died. But will natural selection get emotional about it? No. We will get emotional, of course, because these were our people who have died. It acted as an agent of what? Natural selection. I told you, 10,000 years ago, in the Neolithic period, humans started to domesticate plants and animals. 10,000 years ago, humans started to domesticate the plants and animals. And what was domestication like? From the wild varieties, we chose certain kinds of plants and we chose certain kinds of animals. Meaning, in a way, we chose a certain variation of plants. Even if it was about wheat will have certain variations. Out of those variations, we picked up the one which was favorable to us. And then we kept reproducing it by the way of agriculture. Right? Or the animal that we chose and selected was a specific variant of that animal that we picked up, not species, variant within the same population. And for example, you have to select a goat from the wild variety of the goats for your food. You want to domesticate them. So you will pick up the one that looks far more healthier, which can give you more amount of meat. You picked up that, and that has continued. The ones that were weaker, you did not select them. They were in wild. In wild, they might have changed and they might have adapted to new situations. Or for example, the wheat variety that you chose, out of all the wild wheat variety plants that were available, the variant that you chose was the one in which the seeds would not simply get scattered. On the plant of the wheat, where the seeds of the wheat are present, if let's say you touch it and it is fragile and all the seeds are what dispersed easily, will you be able to bring it to the farm and cultivate? No. You will pick up a more robust and a sturdy one, so that does not easily disperse. So that variety got selected. We acted as an agent of natural selection, is it not? Did we act as an agent of natural selection in that case? Yes. Or we did what? During the Green Revolution, we developed a new variety, the dwarf variety of wheat. And the wheat that we are growing today is the dwarf variety only. Who did this? Humans. Human-induced natural selection, is it not? So don't just think that natural selection is just the environment. It is any agent that can have consequences for a population. Yes or no? That's what? That's like a agent of natural selection, right? Now, once we have understood this aspect, when we looked at the idea that changes in the coding part of the DNA can bring about formation of new alleles which are there. And I told you alleles not necessarily have to be only of two types. But to manifest in the physical traits, they will always be present in combination of two only. Why? Because on chromosomal pairs, homologous pairs, there are only two locations available. Right? Simply assume that you have a wardrobe full of clothes. Those are different alleles which are there. You can only pick and choose one out of them. Or two, let's say, a shirt and a pant. These are two alleles. So, har baar naya allele aayega. Getting my point? So, chromosome only has two spaces to fit in. So, only two alleles will be present and they are going to manifest in the physical traits. Yes, guys? Okay? But it is at an individual level. In the whole population, what will be present? Different alleles are there. And different alleles will be present in different combinations in the population. Hey? For example, I am wearing a green shirt and a black pant. Right? There will be another individual who is wearing a white shirt and a blue pant. Another one with a grey shirt and a beige pant. In the same population, out of the same ward, same set of alleles which are there, different combinations will be present in the population. Hai ki nahi hai? So that is the composition of the genes in a population. What if a component, what if a portion of this population gets isolated reproductively? What if a particular portion of this population gets isolated reproductively? What would happen in that case? There is a possibility that out of all the combination of alleles which are present, only a few types of alleles have gone to a new location. Only few variations will be going to a new location. Who will then get what? Reproductively isolated from the original population. That population will be termed as what? Founding population. And subsequently, in the subsequent generations only, that genetic material will be available. Why? Because that is already isolated, the original one. मान लेते हैं, for the simplistic representation, let us say, in a population, these are the two variations that are present. Just by chance, a portion of this population gets isolated. Let's say this portion. Right? in this new population which has got isolated, isolation meaning it can be geographical isolation, but what is of more importance to us is the reproductive isolation. Geographical isolation bhi karega kya eventually? It is going to reproductively isolate. There can be any ways through which the reproductive isolation can happen. And how this can happen? Maybe because of plate tectonics. Maybe because of plate tectonics or because of migration to a new environment. Which population was the founding population? In this case, the frequency of this variant becomes what? Pretty low. Right? And this population has to be a small population. This population has to be what? A small population. And the frequency of what? This variation is a bit high in this small population. So in small populations, the chances are that this variant will be lost just by accident. कि माइग्रेट करके वहां थका और मर गया, एक कैजुअल तरीके से सोचा. Yes or no? Getting it, people? Online? Through this also the population can have what? Change in the genetic material or not? And variations will be lost. Some variations can be lost by this also, by this process also. Right? Enough time passes, it might appear as a new species also. Okay? And this is called as what? Genetic drift. So what exactly does genetic drift do? It is going to actually bring about what? Extreme level of differences between the isolated population and the original population. They will have considerable genetic differences among themselves. After a considerable period of time, this set of population will have very different genetic characteristics as compared to the genetic characteristics of the original population which was there. Right? So simply, what does genetic drift do to the populations? It increases the genetic differences in the populations. Simple. What does genetic drift do? Genetic drift increases the differences between the populations. I hope it is making sense. Right? Opposite of this is gene flow. Opposite of this is gene flow. Let's say there are two sets of populations. Now let's say both of these have come into contact with each other and they have started interbreeding. They have started interbreeding. So this population which lies in between, which is a result of interbreeding of both of these, they have become closer to each other. Now what will happen? They will have what? Gene flow reduces genetic differences. Genetic drift increases genetic differences. Gene flow increases the genetic differences between the populations. अब देख लेते हैं इसको. The term genetic drift refers to various random processes. Random processes is very, very important. Right, guys? That affects what? Gene frequencies. Frequency is what? Number of times a genetic variation is repeated in a population. Number of time a genetic variation is repeated in a population. Processes that affect gene frequencies in small is very important. Right? Like I told you, in this case, it has to be a small population. And it has to be what? Relatively isolated. random, small, and relatively isolated population. So genetic drift is also known as what? Seawall Wright effect. After genesis, Seawall Wright, who first directed attention to this process. Over time, in a small population, genetic drift may result in what? Neutral or nearly neutral gene becoming more or less frequent just by chance. It was not even adaptive or maladaptive. It just got lost by chance. किस्मत से. Are you getting my point? We were not even concerned with the adaptiveness or maladaptiveness of that, neutral. Just by chance, because it was small in number, it got eliminated. Its frequency was pretty low in the small population, and that can only happen in a small population. Why? Because if the population is huge, if let's say the population is huge and proportionately, let's say even if a variant is smaller in number, its population itself will be huge. Absolute numbers to zyada hi honge, because they are not competing with each other. So chances of the survival of that particular variant will be far more. Statistically, है नहीं है. 4 लोग मान लो कि एक आइलैंड पे फंस गए, तो 4 में से एक के मरने की प्रोबेबिलिटी है. या मान लेते हैं कि सिर्फ 2 ही लोग पहुंचे, एक लड़का और एक लड़की आइसोलेटेड आइलैंड पे पहुंचे, एंड जस्ट बाय रैंडम इवेंट वन ऑफ द पार्टनर्स डाइज. Will they be able to perpetuate their population? No, khatam, game over. But by chance, let's say 20 people reach there. Chance of their survival is pretty high. Getting my point? So simply think that way. So this is how it works. We're not talking about the adaptiveness or maladaptiveness of that trait. It is just that by chance, because the population is small and that variant's frequency is pretty low, it might get eliminated. Right? Consequences. Over time, it increases what? The genetic differences between two genetically related. Why? Because originally it was part of the main population itself. Over time, it increases the genetic differences between two genetically related populations, which are not interbreeding, which are isolated from each other. They were genetically related, but they got isolated from each other. And isolation is what? Reproductive isolation. Isolation मतलब ये नहीं कि उधर दूर जाके बैठ गए. Eventually, the main focus here is what? Reproductive isolation, because that is what is going to have what? Consequences for us from evolutionary perspective. Right? In this case, we see it as what? The founder's effect. Why? Because let's say in this new area, the new population that has gone there, in this one variant would be lost. And the subsequent generations will have what? Only a particular kind of variation. Founding population decided what kind of variations will be available. The original group that got settled decided what? The founding populations. Simply understand, all of the humans originated in Africa. From there, they started migrating in different parts of the world. Which variants moved from Africa and settled for the first time in India, all the subsequent Indians will be of that only. And a founding population decided what kind of genetic material is available here. Yes or no? It's a clear-cut example. For example, the caste system in India. Initially, there was a lot of intermixing that was going on, but caste system became rigid. Rigid meaning endogamy started. Caste system became rigid and endogamy started. When endogamy starts means what? Reproductive isolation. Reproductive isolation or not? One caste gene pool is reproductively isolated from the other caste gene pool. And that is why you might find a particular gene pool in one caste group, and which will be a bit different from the gene pool present in the other caste groups. Why? Because they have remained genetically isolated for almost 80 generations now. Genetic evidence suggests that this genetic isolation might have started 80 generations back, almost 20,000, almost 2,000 years back, when it started to get rigid. So caste, which looks like a social phenomena, also has the implication of what? Reproductively isolating individuals. Interesting or not? That is why anthropology is biocultural. Every time you read, every time you see an example, you just see this idea that is biocultural. Why? Because cultural idea of caste has actually done what? Has created a biological consequence. And because the founding population has certain characteristics, some of the diseases are peculiar to only certain caste groups. Some of the diseases are actually what? Peculiar to certain caste groups because they were found in the founding population. है या नहीं है? Even in your families, if you see, because your genetic makeup of the family is of particular type, you have propensity of having what? Certain kinds of diseases. होता है कि नहीं होता है? It's a clear fact. Right or wrong? ठीक है? Are you all getting this point? So how genetics explain this thing? It's a very interesting thing to understand. That how caste could be related to genetics. Most of the people might not even be able to imagine that how we have to understand this idea. They simply think that it's a social idea, it's a cultural idea. It is a cultural idea, but has biological implications. We are not saying that the caste groups are going to evolve into a new species altogether. It will take millions of years. और बीच में कोई इंटरकास्ट शादी कर लेगा, नया जेनेटिक मटेरियल ले आएगा. But the population will have what? Considerable genetic variations among themselves. And that is why, ever since this division has started to happen, ever since the endogamy began as a process, castes have become genetically far more distant, even if they are living in the same geographical area. Why? Because there is no interbreeding that is happening. मानेंगे बात को? So geographical proximity is not a criteria to understand what? The individuals cannot be, or the groups cannot be reproductively isolated. Same area में एक ही गांव में 5 कास्ट रहती है, आपस में शादी नहीं करती, तो reproductively isolated है. Considerable genetic differences. उसी कास्ट का आदमी बहुत दूर बैठा हुआ है, पर फिर भी सेम होगा. क्यों? क्योंकि कुछ जेनेटिक मटेरियल एक्सचेंज हो सकता है बिकॉज ऑफ मैरिज. इज इट इंटरेस्टिंग और नॉट? है नहीं? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, लेट्स से देयर आर 2 villages in which in this village we have what? 5 kinds of castes, 4 kinds of castes, and here we also have what? These kinds of castes, right? And these are located, let's say, 100 kilometers away, और मान लेते हैं 2 ही गांव है 1000 kilometers away, और 2 ही गांव में इनको आपस में शादी करनी है. तो how they are going to marry? C caste members are going to marry what? C caste members. B are going to marry B caste members. So who will have more genetic similarity? C and C will have more genetic similarity. B and B will have more genetic similarity as compared to what? A, B, C, D themselves, who are living in the same geography. They're living in the same village. Does not make much sense. ठीक है? So one variety of genetic drift is called as what? Founder's effect. Occurs when a small group of organisms recently derived from a larger population, because this was the one which was happening in what? Genetic drift. Because of migration, migrates to a relatively isolated location. If a particular gene is absent just by chance in the migrant group, the descendants are also likely to lack that gene, assuming that group remains isolated and does not interbreed with any other population. Similarly, if all the members of the original migrant group just by chance carried a particular gene, their descendants would also likely to share that kind of gene. For example, surprisingly, African population has no genes related to Neanderthals, because Neanderthals originated in European region. So the Neanderthal DNA is found in European populations and to some extent in the other populations also, but not much in African population, right? Relatively, who have remained isolated. Now, the people who have interbred with the Europeans, maybe they will have some kind of gene. Are you getting my point? That's an example or not? ठीक है? Asian populations have more presence of Denisovans genes. which is another human species. ठीक है? Isolation can occur from physical reasons, such as when a group moves to a previously uninhabited place and does not return. And there is an interesting case study from America. The population that traveled over land when the Bering Land Bridge connected Asia to North America could not readily return when the sea levels rose. I told you, Earth's atmosphere has undergone what? Different periods of glaciation and interglaciation as well as fluviations. So when the glacial periods ended, the seawater rose. While when there was glaciation, the sea waters dropped. When seawater dropped and the ice froze in the Arctic region, the water froze into the Arctic region, you see what? Bering Strait. Where is the Bering Strait? तुमको तो कल आईआर क्लास में बताया था. फील करना पड़ता है, वरना याद नहीं होता. It connects what? Eastern Asia to the North America at the top of the Pacific Ocean. Bering Strait. So Bering Strait is actually what? Connected by a land bridge when the sea waters have dropped and when the water is frozen in the ice. So people could walk from the eastern parts to America. वरना अमेरिका के तैर के थोड़ी जा रहे थे humans. कि आज चलते हैं स्विमिंग पे और अमेरिका पहुंच जाएंगे. Because humans have originated in Africa. From Africa, they started dispersing into Asian region. Some of them reached the East Asian region. From there, they could migrate to Americas via the sea bridge which was present at the Bering Strait. For example, how did the humans reach Australia? When the sea levels were low, they could travel from what? India through the ocean, through the islands that we have in the Southeast Asia, from there to Australia. ठीक है, इंसान की कहानी है. Anthropology is what? The study of man. It is a story of how humans became the humans that they are. Why do we have human variations in time and space? This is what it means. Right? So the population that traveled over land when the Bering Land Bridge connected Asia to North America could not readily return when the sea levels rose. एक बार पहुंच गए, isolate हो गए. Once that population reached there, the sea water rose. They could not come back. This may explain why Native Americans have a higher proportion of individuals with blood type O as compared to other populations. Why? Because the first migrants may have had by chance predominance of individuals with type O blood. Hey, interesting. Right or wrong? Isolation can also occur for social reasons, which is what? I told you about caste. I told you about caste also. A religious sect of Anabaptists called as Dunkers emigrated from Germany to United States of America in the early 1700s. The fact that 50 original families kept to themselves probably explains what? Why some of their gene frequencies differ from what is found in both Germany and general US populations. Why? Because they never interbred with the American population. And from Germany also a small population went with only the founding effect, with only the founders' genes. So their genetic component is very different from what? The related German population. What does genetic drift do? Genetic drift does what? Genetic drift creates differences between two genetically related populations. यही तो देखा था अपन ने. समझ में? आया ना भाई? From the original founding population, if this group is getting isolated, it will have what? New characteristics. These were genetically related population. These are Germans. And these are also what? Germans. But because of the genetic drift, their differences are pretty much high as compared to the original German population. And in the new area where they went, they never interbred with the Americans. So they have differences from the Americans also. Because their founding population had this genetic material. True. Next is gene flow. Right? Gene flow is the opposite of genetic drift. It is when genes pass from one population to another through mating and reproduction. Two isolated populations, if they come into contact with each other and interbreed with each other, they are going to exchange what? Genetic material. What exactly is the consequence of the sexual activity and reproduction? It is the exchange of genetic material. That is what is happening. है नहीं है? It is the diffusion or the spread of the new genetic material from one population to another of the same species. In other words, genes from one gene pool are transferred to another gene pool. Genetic flow tends to decrease the differences between two populations. Yes or no? Two populations at the opposite ends of a region may have different frequencies of a particular gene, but populations located between them have an intermediate gene frequency. Because of gene flow between them, the variation of gene frequency from one end of the region to the another is called as what? A cline. What do we call it? Cline, a slope. The term that we use is what? Cline. For example, we see that most of the racism is based on what? White skin color and the black skin color or the dark skin color. Most of the racism is based on this idea only. It is based on what? The physical traits of white skin and the dark skin. Right? Now let's say a person from Kashmir who has never seen a person living in Tamil Nadu, all of a sudden sees a person living in Tamil Nadu and the Tamil Nadu person sees a Kashmiri, they will see that we are very, very different, even if we are part of the same species. Right? And mostly humans interact culturally. They might not be thinking about the idea that we are same species, hai, nahi hai, kya hai. Hey, point? But let's say if this Kashmiri starts slowly migrating from Kashmir towards Tamil Nadu, or this person from Tamil Nadu starts slowly migrating towards Kashmir, traveling all through the India, we'll find that skin colors vary not in zeros and ones. Actually, there is a whole gradation that happens. From lighter skin shades to moderately lighter skin shades to browner skin shades to darker skin shades. It is a whole climb. And that is why in anthropology they say what? There are no pure races. Rather, there are what? Clines. Very important statement in anthropology. There are what? Clines only. Okay? The case studies in Europe, for example, there is a cline in the distribution of type B blood, which gradually diminishes in frequency from east to west. East to west. Meaning, the distribution of B blood type is more present in what? The eastern parts of the Europe. Your Georgia and this part. है ना? Eastern part of Europe में क्या होगा? Type B blood would be more. And when they start migrating towards west, the frequency is going to decline. हाँ कर सकते हैं. The gene that causes sickle cell anemia among the West African blacks, it has a frequency of about 10%. Among the American whites, it has a frequency of 0%. Because West African blacks and their descendants have long reproduced with American whites, the frequency among the people descended from both West African blacks and American whites of the gene pool that cause sickle anemia is approximately what? 5%. People who interbred have an average of both of them, right? Halfway between the two original populations. Originally, the whites did not have sickle cell anemia gene, while the blacks had what? Sickle cell anemia gene. But the people who interbred between both of them have almost approximately 50% presence of that. Over time, as the two populations are mixed, gene flow has decreased what? Genetic differences. Okay? So I hope this whole discussion on natural selection is clear to you, how evolution takes place. Okay? So what has emerged out of these discussions is, when Mendel was talking about, what do you say, the genetics, he was talking about what? How exactly they're inherited at an individual level. Then it happens at what? A population level also. So there are human genetics and there is what? Population genetics. These are two different, two fields that have emerged out of the genetics. Okay? And in this case, There are certain traits in the humans, certain physical traits in the humans which follow what? The Mendelian principles of dominant and recessive alleles, and how they are inherited. We study them. Right? They are called as what? Mendelian inheritance. It is called as Mendelian inheritance. Got the point? Okay, we are going to study that part. So the next handout that I have shared with you, one is the Mendelian inheritance, second is non-Mendelian inheritance, and I'll tell you what is the difference between the two later. Just keep this thing in mind. Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance, and then population genetics. True? Clear? I hope this is getting a bit simpler as we are progressing. Things are becoming clearer. The context is becoming clearer. Now your job is to do what? Consolidate things. Right? And I've told you this is a pretty straightforward section. Questions are also straightforward. Just the understanding part has to be clear, and you have to be ready with the write-ups that you're going to draw in the examination. You are going to write in the examination. Fine. Okay then. Let's meet on Monday. Weekend is there. Complete all of these things. Plus, there is one handout that I've shared on the group, which is handout number 21, which is just a simple handout about the Doll's rule, Cope's rule, right? The adaptive convergent evolution, divergent evolution, right? उस पे क्वेश्चन बहुत ही रेयर आता है. Just go, do read and have a write-up prepared. जो लिखा हुआ उसी को याद कर लेना और एग्जाम के लिए तैयार कर लेना. Focus has to be on more important ones, which are far more important. क्योंकि वो बायोलॉजी वाइज थोड़ा ऐसा ठीक लगता है, बट इधर उसका इतना इंपॉर्टेंस है नहीं, क्योंकि यहाँ पे ऑलरेडी बहुत सारे टॉपिक्स हैं जिनको पूछ सकता है वो. ठीक है गाइस? Handout number 21 has a few topics. Just go through that. Right? Basic level biology. ठीक है? चलो ठीक है. Bye.
StudyIQ IAS, आपका सिलेक्शन हमारा मिशन.